What's up guys, it's MMA Matt here, and in today's video, we're going to be analyzing the former double champ of one championship, Reinier de Ridder, who recently signed to the UFC and made his UFC debut. Becoming a double champ in any MMA promotion is no small feat, and because of this high profile accomplishment, a lot of MMA fans are wondering how he's going to stack up to the new competition that the UFC has to offer. So in this video, we're going to be analyzing the style of fighting that Reinier de Ridder brings to the table and see how he will stack up against the rest of the serious contenders in the middleweight division. Reinier de Ridder is a fighter known for his versatility and well-rounded skill set in the cage, and this makes him a dominant force in mixed martial arts. His fighting style is a blend of very solid striking, elite level grappling, and a strong game plan every time he comes into the cage. A key feature of Reinier de Ridder's style is his exceptional grappling and his submission skills. He has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he has demonstrated multiple times in his high-profile fights that he can incorporate his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skill to win his fights. For example, in his first fight against Ong Liang Sang at One Championship, Reinier de Ridder was able to neutralize Ong Liang Sang's striking by taking him down, and eventually this led to him smoothly taking Ong Liang Sang's back and submitting him due to a rear naked choke to win him the belt. Now, Reinier de Ridder's striking, while it is not as calibrated as his grappling, it is functional and effective. He often uses his strikes to set up takedowns or to create openings to implement his grappling. His clinch game is also a crucial aspect of his striking that you cannot ignore when you're analyzing Reinier de Ridder's complete fighting game. Reinier de Ridder is very good at landing short, effective punches and knees in close quarters while in the clinch. He also has very good control over his opponents when he's working in the tight spaces. This clinch control allows him to dictate the pace of his fights and diminish his opponent's will to fight by constantly wearing them out in the clinch. Another defining aspect of Reinier de Ridder's game is his fight IQ and adaptability. He has shown in numerous of his fights the ability to adapt to his opponent's style and change his game in order to secure his wins. And like I mentioned before, Reinier de Ridder, he has very good game planning, and I think that game planning is a very underrated aspect of MMA. I feel like a lot of the fight happens before you step in the cage, and Reinier de Ridder is an example of a very good fighter who brings in a very strategic game plan when he's fighting certain stylistic matchups in his opponents. And another example of a good game planner is also Dricus du Plessis. And I know that fans have drawn a lot of comparisons between those two fighters, and we're going to talk about those comparisons a little later on in the video. But those two fighters, they have a lot of similarities, and the game planning aspect outside the cage is something that they both have in common, along with some other aspects that they use in the octagon. Now, let's be honest, this would not be a video about Reinier de Ridder without mentioning his physicality in the cage. Reinier de Ridder is very physical, and he fights with a relentless pressure by pressuring his opponents using his strikes, working tirelessly for takedowns, or controlling them on the ground. Reinier de Ridder, he has very good conditioning, and the use of his cardio and conditioning in his fights to revolutionize his pressure game is what makes him a very complete fighter in the octagon. And using the skill sets that I just explained, Reinier de Ridder was able to become a double champ in one's middleweight division and light heavyweight divisions. Unfortunately, both of his title reigns came to an end when he lost both belts and decided to leave the promotion of One Championship. Eventually, Reinier de Ridder was signed to the UFC and made his UFC debut against Gerald Meerschaert on November 9th, 2024. And while he managed to win this fight by submission in round 3, there were many aspects of Reinier de Ridder's game that needs improvement before he can compete with the elite middleweights in the UFC. Firstly, he showed vulnerabilities in his ability to maintain dominant positions in the grappling. Gerald Meerschaert was able to threaten Reinier de Ridder with dangerous positions, and even though Reinier de Ridder was able to take down Gerald Meerschaert early, there were moments where Reinier struggled to effectively control Gerald Meerschaert on the ground. And this allowed Gerald Meerschaert to have these moments where he could easily reverse certain positions that Reinier de Ridder was trying to put him in. Also, Reinier de Ridder, he could have composed himself better while he was grappling. In some moments of that fight, it felt like Reinier de Ridder was thinking way faster than his body was moving, and it led to certain moments where it seemed like some of his success in the fight was kind of accidental, especially on the ground. And I feel like Reinier de Ridder, he needs to be more composed and just take a moment to think about the position that he's in and not to rush any techniques that can potentially get him the win in the fight, because he was getting the takedowns secured and his takedown defense also held up as well. I believe Gerald Meerschaert did not get a single takedown, so we know that his defensive grappling and defensive wrestling is solid, but the offensive grappling is what he needs to just slow down and work on the techniques involved in the positions that he's in, rather than rushing certain techniques that could have potentially got him the win in the first round. Another area of Reinier de Ridder's game that I could critique is his striking approach. Even though Reinier de Ridder maintained distance and used his jab effectively at times, his striking lacked fluidity. He struggled to implement any consistent offense in this game against Meerschaert on the feet, and even though he did score a huge knockdown at the end of the first round, it didn't seem as calculated and as focused as the other strikers in the middleweight division. And remember, we're comparing him to the rest of the middleweight division. And when you're dealing with the other middleweights, especially the ranked ones, the striking is going to be a big aspect that Reinier de Ridder is going to have to perfect if he wants to get anywhere near the belt. And the striking performance against Gerald Meerschaert, Reinier de Ridder, he didn't do garbage, but there are other middleweights that will piece him up on the feet if he brings that same style to that type of fight. So he needs to refine his striking game to get close to a contender in the middleweight division. And another point that I want to emphasize when it comes to Reinier de Ridder's debut is that he showed these holes in his game against Gerald Meerschaert, who isn't even ranked in the middleweight division. Most fighters who are promising contenders and prospects in the middleweight division run through GM3 like Khamzat Chimaev did. And I understand that styles make fights, so GM3 could have just been a hard stylistic matchup for Reinier de Ridder, but you still need to consider that the difficulty of fighters skyrocket once you start getting close to the rankings. And when you also consider that Reinier de Ridder is already 34 years old and he's basically already completed an entire career in one championship. So I don't think that he's just gonna all of a sudden evolve his game to the point where he can become a serious contender for the belt. So based on his performance against GM3, I do think that he beats Kevin Holland at UFC 311, and I also think that he can be a ranked fighter in the middleweight division. However, I don't see him cracking the top 10. And in regards to the Dricus du Plessis comparisons, a lot of people are saying that Reinier de Ridder, he can be a top fighter in the middleweight division because he fights like DDP. And I definitely see shades of DDP in the way that a lot of their success looks accidental. But what people are forgetting when they compare DDP and Reinier de Ridder is that DDP has a way better chin than Reinier de Ridder. Reinier de Ridder has been knocked out twice recently, and you can't find success off of DDP style if you can't take shots. And when you also consider that Reinier de Ridder, he got knocked out in one championship, which has subpar talent compared to the UFC in the upper weight classes, that is my main reason why I think that he does not make it past the top 10 in the middleweight division. So as of right now, I think that he can beat Kevin Holland, but he loses to Jack Hermanson or Anthony Hernandez. So Reinier de Ridder is a very skilled fighter, but in regards to how good he is in comparison to the UFC roster, I do not think that he is a top 10 middleweight at this moment.